Good afternoon, delegates. Good afternoon, delegates. Welcome back. And to kick off our afternoon, can I ask you to join me in welcoming our great EU election candidates to the stage? We have Alan Smith, Christian Allard, Aileen MacLeod, Margaret Ferrier, Heather Anderson, and Alec Kerr. Delegates, I'm sure you will join me in wishing them all the best for the elections. I look forward to seeing all of you on the campaign trail over the next few weeks as we do our very best to get them elected. So thank you very much to our European candidates. Conference, we have had a number of internal elections, so I will now ask Angus MacLeod, our National Secretary, to update you with the results. Angus.
So, good afternoon, Conference. The full breakdown of results will be available on my SNP next week, but I will declare the winners now. For Member Support Convener, John Clark is elected. For Policy Development Convener, Alan Smith is elected. For the Conferences Committee, Lorraine Alexander, Kirstine Curry, Rosemary Hunter, Anne McLaughlin and Corrie Wilson are elected. For the Conferences Committee Open List, Danny Aston, Doug Daniel, Patrick Grady, Chris Hanlon and Kasim Hanif are elected. For the Glasgow Open List, Alexander Belich is elected. For the Lothian Open List, Danny Aston is elected. For the North East Scotland Open List, Doug Daniel is elected. For the South of Scotland all-female list, Heather Anderson is elected. For the South of Scotland open list, Peter Henderson is elected. For the West Scotland all-female list, Caroline Bamforth is elected. For the West Scotland open list, Jim Patterson is elected. For the Mid-Scotland and Fife all-female list, Rosemary Hunter is elected. For the Mid-Scotland and Fife open list, Chris Hanlon is elected. And finally, last but not least, for the branch out with Scotland, Russell McLean is elected. So congratulations to all those who were successful in the internal elections.
Thank you, Angus, and congratulations to all these successful candidates. Delegates, we'll move on now to our resolutions, starting with resolution number 14, Menopause and the Workplace, to be proposed by Councillor Katie Loudon and seconded by Claire Hoy, MSP.
Thank you, Kirsten. Conference, how many times have you heard people referring to the change or women of a certain age? Even the word menopause has been taboo. Thankfully, that's changing, and our branch is asking you today to be part of this movement. Nearly 2/3 of women aged 50 to 64 in Scotland are in employment, which is a rise of nearly 6% in the last 10 years. This means that more employees will be experiencing menopausal symptoms whilst at work. For some, the menopause can begin far earlier. Symptoms can last for over 10 years, can be severe, and can have a direct impact on women in the workplace. There are two broad issues at play here: the physical working environment, from rest and toilet facilities to ventilation and temperature, which can worsen symptoms and increase stress. Then there are workplace culture issues, from the perceived ability to speak to line managers and colleagues about physical and emotional issues, the belief that you will be listened to absence management and medical appointment policies. Over 3,500 women answered an STUC Menopause in the Workplace survey last year. Here are some quick facts. Nearly a third of those who responded said that menopause was treated negatively in the workplace. Nearly 2/3 said it was treated as a joke. Conference, this isn't good enough. 95% of respondents said they would welcome a policy framework for employers, and that is what we're asking you to support today. Change is already afoot. On Friday in Perth, the world's only menopause festival took place, with a focus on menopause and the workplace. Our Minister for Older People and Equalities, Christina McKelvey, has repeatedly said that she is determined to improve the position for women affected by the menopause. Organisations like the Menopause Cafe Network and many others are offering practical and emotional support to women. Last July, at South Lanarkshire Council, we agreed a menopause policy which has got three broad aims: to ensure that line managers have been trained to enable them to provide guidance, support, and necessary workplace adjustments; to create greater confidence in employees to raise issues and ask for adjustments; and to promote guidance for those who are affected indirectly. I'd like to personally highlight the work of our Deputy Provost, Colette Stevenston, for her instrumental role in pushing this policy within our group and across the Council. She can't be here today, but her drive, her vision, and her commitment to this policy should be recognised. We have over 11,000 women working for our council. Not only do we have a responsibility to make sure that we support them in the workplace, but we have a responsibility to send a message that we will value and that we will listen to them. Our branch put forward this resolution because we believe that our conference, our party, should send out that same message today. Today we are asking for this work to be continued and built on, engagement with unions, the third sector, other stakeholders, and of course with women themselves. This isn't just an equality issue conference, it's about recognising the value of women in the workplace. It's about productivity and our economy. Supporting employees benefits everyone, and we should support and empower employers to this end. As a party at all levels of government, we'd work with others to bring around transformational change in women's lives. Don't forget that we were the first country in the world to provide access to free sanitary products to those in education. Our party has shown a real commitment to women's health. Conference, let's keep building on that. I'd like to finish with a quote from the journalist Mandy Rhodes. There are some subjects that wait for a generation to catch up. The menopause has now found its time. Let's all get behind it, conference. Let's embrace this change. Conference, let's do this. I urge you to support this resolution.
Thank you, Katie. Now, to second the resolution, Claire Haughey, MSP, to be followed by Christina McKelvey, MSP.
Thank you, Conference, and I am delighted to second this motion. Although for some it might sometimes feel uncomfortable to speak about it, menopause is a fact of life, a normal part of a woman's life cycle. Just under 50% of the world's population are women, nearly 3.8 billion of us, and with the vast majority of women in the developed world at least living well beyond menopausal age, it's about time this issue was taken more seriously. Menstruating women will often experience menopause at the peak of their working lives, often while juggling caring responsibilities, and their health and well-being in the workplace is not being taken seriously enough. Women recognise this, the trade union movement recognises this, and Conference, we need to recognise this, and work with employers to develop understanding and, importantly, guidance on how to support women in their employment. Friends, Scotland is a progressive nation brimming with innovation and confidence of its role in the world. And we're never ones to shirk away from stigma or taboo issues. Well, menopause and its impact on women is one of those taboo issues we need to tackle. Hot flushes may be one of the more better known symptoms of menopause, but irregular periods, sleep problems, fatigue, anxiety, irritability, and difficulty concentrating can also occur, having an impact on daily functioning both at home and at work. Just imagine, conference, trying to work after a night disturbed by night sweats, or feeling low in mood and anxious, and then having to face your boss and your colleagues to explain why you've been finding it difficult to function, only to be ridiculed or to have your menopause treated as a joke. This is the reality for many women across Scotland. This is something we can and must change. A little over 3 months ago, this SNP Scottish Government funded a conference to look at women's lived experience of transitioning through menopause. From this, they committed to expanding our workplace equality fund with employers and trade unions to improve workplace practices, including support during menopause. Some of the groundwork has already been done, but conference, there is still a way to go to ensure women get the support that they need. Better understanding from employers, necessary adjustments at work, best practice guidance for employers, and above all, dignity and respect at work for all women. Conference, I urge you to support this resolution.
Thank you, Claire. To speak for the motion, Christina McKelvey, MSP. Christina is the Minister for Older People and Equalities, to be followed by Abby Hastings.
Good afternoon, conference. You know, when you fill in the card for your speaking slot, I put on my card that I was the Minister for Equality and I had an interest in this, but I was also a menopausal woman. So, but I'm in a good mood today, don't worry. But that's the key aspect to this, isn't it? Because people laugh at things like that when actually it's not that funny. And something as natural as the menopause should not be a barrier to the work or the workplace that you're in. And the public services that we currently have, the support services we currently have to be realigned to take all that into account. There's recent good examples, we've heard of some, good practice relating to workplace policies, and the government, Scottish Government, have been drawn on that. Can I pay my tribute to Colette Stevenson and the women at South Lanarkshire Council and the men at South Lanarkshire Council have supported them with that policy that they're taking forward. The point of that policy has meant that other local authorities are now looking at their workforces, looking at their policies and looking at changing that as well. So, you know, this is infectious, this change. Can also pay tribute to the Scottish Women's Convention and the STUC, who have been battling this battle for a long time, but we're now allies in that battle. So some of the good examples that we have to support women is through the gender pay gap, which my colleague Jamie Hepburn just published recently. We have some policy in there. And of course, you wouldn't expect anything less for our new older people's framework to have something in there about older women in the workplace, including the menopause. Conference, we should be ambitious. We are ambitious for our government to take the necessary steps, whether that's local government, whether that's through the trade union movement, whether that's actually in our government practices as well. I support this motion today. I hope you support this motion. Let's send that message that the women of our party will be supported by the men of our party to change the culture of our nation for all women. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. We now have Abby Hastings to speak for the motion. Abby is a first-time speaker, to be followed by Pam Mitchell.
Conference, as a young person who has grown up only knowing the Scottish Parliament, I have experienced firsthand the benefits of its bold, progressive policies, from free university tuition and free prescriptions to allowing me to vote at 16. This motion offers us yet another opportunity to be bold and address a key issue that is facing millions. The topic of female health is something that has been stigmatised, ignored and treated with silence for too long, And I ask, and I know that Scotland, like it has done in so many areas, takes the lead in taking this progressive steps forwards. Menopause is something that either yourself or someone that you know well will experience, and breaking down these systematic and institutional barriers is key, not only for those being affected now and in the near future, but for the generations in creating a future with better awareness and understanding. I also commend this motion, for it is a first step in tackling a bigger issue in women's hormonal health. There is a statistically significant link between women's suicide attempts in the days leading up to menstruation. This is an area that needs to be explored further, as the stigma surrounding these issues can prevent people from speaking out. This is something that can be prevented through education and support to ending the suffering of countless women. Friends, I hope I have conveyed the seriousness of this issue that this motion begins to touch on. It's something that I care strongly about, and hopefully you now have an appreciation of the seriousness of the issue. And I ask that you join me in supporting this motion. Thanks, friends.
Thank you, Abby. And our final speaker in support of the resolution is Pam Mitchell.
Good afternoon, conference. I'm so pleased that this motion has been put forward. As a woman who became menopausal at the age of 48, I endured all kinds of stigma in the workplace, and so many people just thought it was a joke. If I needed to go to the toilet more often, my boss would ask, why, in front of everybody? Why do you have to keep going? It was almost like a humiliation exercise. When I had the hot flushes, I would literally sweat from my scalp down to my knees. And everybody just thought this was so funny. The fact that I actually felt ill, tired, depressed at that point didn't come into any kind of thought process. There were no facilities, there were no people to help, no one wanted to know. It was still a taboo subject, and if you dared mention it, people tutted quite loudly. You know, keep that to yourself, for goodness sake, it's not appropriate. So for me, I welcome this motion, and I really hope that we can change things for women all over Scotland, and I hope you will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. There are no cards in to speak against the motion, delegates. Katie, can I ask if you wish to sum up, or if you wish to waive your right to sum up? Katie is waiving her right to sum up. So given that there are no cards in against, delegates, can I ask if this resolution is passed by acclaim? Thank you, conference. We move now on to Resolution 15, Fairness for Gig Economy Workers, to be moved by Joe Farrell and seconded by Peter Clements.
I'm very grateful, Convener, for the opportunity to put this motion. I'm also very grateful for the fact that it's been greeted in silence, at least at the beginning. It's always better to start off with a condition of silence. But I've been encouraged, and other things which have drawn applause in the course of this. It's been the confidence with which many people have suggested that we're coming close to the idea of independence. But I've been even more encouraged, as have many other people in this hall, by the recognition that independence is not just a great golden day, but it gives us the opportunity, the tools, the equipment to forge a different kind of society, a society which is fairer, a society which is better, a society which offers opportunities for all. One of the things we have to be aware of is that society, and not only in Scotland, society all over the Western world is now changing. And indeed, we're now witnessing one of the great epochal changes, I would suggest, that has happened over the last couple of hundred years. That is to say, the introduction of something which is now called the gig economy. Not a particularly happy name, not something which is very well defined, but nevertheless something which is known to many people here only as a convenient way to call taxes and only as a convenient way to have the pizza delivered while it's still steaming hot. But it's much wider than that. And if you read, as I have been doing, the response of business leaders to this new change, they in general welcome it. They welcome it because it is good for profits. It gives the possibility of an extension of profit by virtue of the fact that it does not require them to make available the same amount of resources in terms of space, workspace, and above all, it gives them the opportunity of being in control of salaries. Now, the change that is taking place is that we're moving away from an age in which the trade unions were strong and were organised and were dealing with the workforce in specific places. We're now dealing with a different kind of employment. We're now dealing with the fact of people who are working on their own. But we've now got to distinguish between the freedom that may give to some people to work on their own, with the fact that it is also important that people who work in this particular sector are given fair salaries, fair wages, fair respect. In other words, don't be misled by a couple of coy, clever words that it offers greater flexibility or that it offers a different kind of work-life balance. Where is the flexibility if you're not sure of how big your salary is going to be in any given week, or indeed if you're going to have a salary at all? Flexibility for people who use this, flexibility above all for people who are employers in this sector, actually is equivalent to a different kind of exploitation for other people who are indispensable in this society. In other words, it's time for radically new thinking. Scotland obviously is not alone. But nevertheless, granted the traditions that we boast of, we could be in the forefront of new thinking about this new kind of society. There are various other things going in to make this new society, and they're going hand in hand with this gig economy. 0-hour contracts, which is a scandal and a disgrace, and is no sort of contract at all. It's one of the underpinnings of the rampant inequality which this conference or previous conferences have deplored, where we now have an untold gulf between people at the top and people at the bottom, and let's call a spade, people genuinely at the bottom who are doing their best to make ends meet. There is no standard of justice, fairness, equity, or decency which can justify this kind of gulf, and the gig economy feeds into it. I was impressed years ago when I read in Arthur Koestler a statement that just as soon as ordinary people, working people, that's to say people whose only resource they have to sell is their labour, as soon as they get to a situation in which they can bring a certain force to bear on the conditions of society, on the sharing out of the goods of society, at that point, then the conditions change. And we have got to recognise that. Now, in any situation in which people are making a new demand for rights and status, there's always two possibilities, either the use of force, which the trade unions did, or law. We're considering now, demanding now, in our last sentence, that we have to have legislation which catches up to this to grant fairness and equality for all. I urge you to support this move.
Thank you very much, Joe. We now have Peter Clements to second the resolution, to be followed by Alexander Anderson to speak for the resolution.
Good afternoon, friends. First of all, I'd like to thank my branch for allowing and working with me to get this resolution in front of you today. As a relatively new member of the SNP, it's been amazing to take part. Thank you. It's been amazing to take part in the process of forming policy that I hope that makes life of fellow Scots a lot better. Friends, let me explain why I feel this resolution is important. But just before I do that, I want to make it clear that it's not about restricting the freedoms of the self-employed. This is about making sure that all workers are given the opportunity to be treated fairly. This is about treating workers with the respect they deserve. It is not right that in today's age of parcels we want delivered yesterday, takeaways we want on our plates by the time we have put the phone down, and taxis we want to take us to places cheaper than ever before. That's why that is the worker that will suffer while the profits of big business get bigger. Friends, it is not right that a worker who falls ill has to suffer financial distress with zero support from the employer. It is not right that a worker has no right to holiday pay because the company has a profit margin to increase. It is not right that big business are allowed to use workers in a way that will ultimately make us, as a society, poorer morally and financially. The gig economy doesn't have to be exploitive. It can work both workers and contractor. The world of work has changed. The law has not kept up. The UK government is failing the people who have to work within the so-called gig economy. The UK government must evolve all employment law immediately so that we can get on and do the job that they are incapable of doing. We need to protect the gig economy workers and offer them the protection from employers who care more about profit margin and very little about workers' rights. I believe that workers' rights should be one of the cornerstones of an independent Scotland. From the Carlton Weavers' strike in 1787 to the tireless work of Jimmy Reid, Scotland has a proud tradition of standing up for the workers. This is our moment to stand up for these workers who deserve the fairness that many of those brave men and women who have came before us fought so hard. Please back the resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Peter was our first-time speaker. Very well done. To speak for the resolution, Alexander Anderson, to be followed by Chris Stevens, MP.
Thank you, Fiona. Conference, I think we all recognise the convenience. You get home from a long day and you can't really be bothered cooking, so you push a few buttons on your phone and the fast food of your choice is at the door within the hour. Or perhaps you've left it too late to get the bus to where you want to be, and so you call yourself an Uber to see yourself there safely. All very convenient, all very straightforward. But the people providing these services often work in the most insecure employment in what's known as the gig economy. Officially, but not really self-employed most of the time, denied many employment rights, therefore, that most would take for granted. Where a technical status of self-employed is used by an employer to deny people rights, this must always be opposed. We must distinguish, therefore, between the genuinely self-employed, those who have used the opportunities that those can bring that have been outlined by previous speakers, and those who are making money for a company and accordingly must be considered an employee. There can be two ways about it. People cannot be denied sick pay or the minimum wage or protection against dismissal because their employer wants to make a few extra quid. Conference, funnily enough, the UK government quite likes this arrangement. It seems unwilling to do anything about it. So employment law and all other aspects, frankly, must be devolved to the Scottish Parliament ultimately. This is useful more. Thank you. This is useful very generally because we could put an end, for example, to unfair pay based on age. Now, I am 18, I earn the minimum wage I could be paid. People who are older than me who do the same job earn more for the exact same work, which doesn't seem very fair. With devolution, with devolution of employment, we can impose a real living wage, not their kind of pretendy one. Equal pay for equal work, and end these unfair practices, ensuring that basic employment rights apply to all. A fair day's work must be rewarded with a fair day's pay. Conference, there's a quote from a philosopher that sums up the gig economy best. Right now, companies really enjoy giving all of the responsibility to the workers while keeping all of the profits for themselves. Companies like Deliveroo and Uber are really fond of saying our drivers are not employees, so they're technically self-employed, so they don't need things like workers' rights and a living wage. But we still get to make all the profit they make for us. If that seems unfair, even unjust to you, then support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. And now Chris Stevens, MP, to speak for the resolution, followed by James Proctor to speak for the resolution.
Well, thank you, Kirsten. I do want to thank the Glasgow Maryhill branch for putting this very important resolution before you, because as the old song goes, Maryhill is wonderful, and they've proven it with this resolution. Now, at Westminster, we get lectured every week by the Conservatives who tell us that they are the party of the worker. Now, are they the party of the worker? A woman worker who turns up in the workplace to be told that her shift is cancelled after she's had to pay for transport and childcare? Are they the party of the worker when that same worker goes into work the next day and told, you've not to work 5 hours today, you have to work 10 hours? Are they the party of the worker when 4 individuals get a text message from their boss to be told the first person that gets here gets the shift? Because that is what's going on in the so-called gig economy. And that's why I presented a bill at Westminster called the Workers' Rights Definitions Bill to stop some of these practices. Because if someone is having to spend money If someone's having to spend money to go to their workplace and they're told it's a shift, and if they're told they have to work extra hours, they should be paid double time and not told that they have to go home. And if they're told to go home, they should still be paid double time for that full shift. We need to work, as the movers and seconder of the resolution said, about worker status. So many people turn up at their workplace who think they're an employee are then mystifiedly told that they're somehow self-employed. We need to address these issues. And as you'll remember, Kirsten, during the Scotland Act, we were lectured by the Labour Party that workers' rights were safer in Tory hands than they were in the Scottish Parliament. What absolute, complete and utter nonsense. And as we enter the European elections, let's not forget, it's the European Parliament and the European Commission who are now looking at the rights of workers in the so-called gig economy. The Tories want to leave that institution and tell us that workers' rights are safer in their hands. Absolutely no way. And I'll just say to end this, Kirsten, I was 6th in the European list at the last European elections. I want to see Alec Kerr elected in the European elections this time. He's number 6. Let's go for all 6 seats in Scotland in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our final speaker on this resolution is James Proctor to speak for the resolution, and James is a first-time speaker.
Friends, as convener of Edinburgh Central SNP, I am proud and delighted to welcome you to our constituency, and I hope that you've been made as welcome as I was when I moved here from Inverness in 2016. Since moving, I've gotten to know Edinburgh's tenements and streets like the back of my hand, which I hope will come in handy when removing our MSP, Ruth Davidson, in 2021. All right, settle down. I gained this knowledge in two ways: campaigning for the SNP in the myriad of elections that we've had recently, and by taking a second job to save up for my first home. In order to get some extra cash, while working around my day job in the tech industry, I got on my bike and I signed up to work for a well-known food delivery company. I use the term work for very loosely, as riders, as they are known, are self-employed and required to sign a supplier agreement. They are effectively independent contractors. While not required to accept work, they are also not guaranteed it. Shifts were offered a week in advance in 3 booking slots. The riders who worked peak times or hadn't cancelled shifts at short notice were given priority to book the best shifts. Everyone else shared what remained, which could be nothing. I only worked one evening a week, cycling between 15 and 20 kilometres in a single shift in all weathers. Riding as a main source of income would take a toll on any body, as well as your vehicle, which you maintain at your own expense. If either is not fit for work, you receive no pay from the company. And the ranking system means that an event like illness or vehicle failure could cost you shifts in the future. Delivery riding is piece rate work. There is no hourly pay, only a fee per delivery. If it's quiet, if you're lost, if you're stuck in traffic, or if you're waiting at a busy restaurant, it can be not only costly, but stressful, which I believe increases the likelihood of an accident. Fares are increased during adverse weather, and this is pitched as to allow you to go slower between jobs. However, I believe that this is to entice riders out during potentially busy and dangerous periods, which puts their safety at risk. Research from the Resolution Foundation found that those on the lowest pay saw an average monthly wage fluctuation of £180, which drives them to high-interest credit cards and unscrupulous predatory payday lenders. Friends, while riding, I had the safety of a full-time job, but there are many using the gig economy as their main source of income who are being let down by a system that has not kept up with technological advances. You've already heard of some of the some of the people that have helped workers' rights in Scotland. Let's do that today and support this resolution.
Thank you very much, James. Delegates, we have no cards in to speak against this motion. Can I ask Joe, do you wish to sum up, Joe?
We've heard enough to explain why this is an indispensable resolution. I would suggest to you it is in its own way every bit as important as the discussion we had earlier on about growth, which deals with finances and the economy. This resolution deals with society and the economy. In addition to that, and this is my final sentence, when we're talking about holiday pay, when we're talking about sickness allowance, when we're talking about equal pay, we're not talking about privileges. We're talking about rights which have been hard-won and should not be surrendered. I beg you not. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Delegates, as there are no cards in against this motion, can I ask conference if you are content that the resolution is passed by acclaim? Thank you very much, delegates. We move on now to resolution number 16, EU structural funds, to be moved by Drew Hendry MP and seconded by Fergus Ewing MSP.
Conference, I'm used to some spectacular sights in the Highlands, but this one is fantastic. I'm grateful to Inverness City Branch and all the Highlands and Islands branches for supporting this resolution, and the MPs and MSPs and others. Conference, before we had a Scottish Parliament, it was only when it suited Westminster that Scotland would see investment. Scotland was, more often than not, left behind by Westminster with other priorities, especially in rural Scotland. In the Highlands, despite the talent, the energy, the ingenuity and resourcefulness of our people, we lived up to the title of a disadvantaged region.
Too many people living on poor wages, a near constant population drain, young people leaving home to seek the jobs they needed elsewhere because of limited opportunities and prospects. We needed a way to tackle that, but our options were sparse. Until we became part of the EU with the rest of the UK, suddenly we became beneficiaries of European policies based on fairness and social cohesion, as did the rest of Scotland. Then came devolution with the massive strides of the past 20 years, especially through our own SNP Scottish Government. We still benefit today from the massive current EU programmes worth many hundreds of millions of euros directed in partnership with the Scottish Government. Across Scotland and Shetland, Fife, Lanarkshire, Dundee, Ayrshire, Glasgow, right here. In our workplaces and communities, developing skills, boosting our business competitiveness, planting woodlands, enabling community transport, supporting innovation, addressing climate change, tackling poverty, inequality, and much more. But all of that is to be squandered by Westminster's Brexit folly. A report by the Independent Committee of the Peripheral and Maritime Regions has shown that Scotland will lose €841 million of EU funding between 2021 and 2027. In the Highlands and Islands alone, that's €183 million. Now, the Brexit promise was that Scotland shouldn't worry, that we could trust Westminster to sort it out. They said they would create the so-called Shared Prosperity Fund. Oh, and by the way, don't worry, Westminster will decide how it's spent. Conference, this insulting power grab, further undermining devolution is bad enough. But what's worse is that to date, it is just another Brexit fantasy. Time after time, we've asked them to bring forward the details. Promise after promise has been broken to tell us how much this fund would contain and how it would work. Deadline after deadline ignored. The truth is, they don't care about it. It isn't their priority. It never was their priority and never would have been. They failed and are failing Scotland again, ignoring the needs of our communities, disregarding our Parliament and our government. Now, this motion calls for that to come to an end, and we must stand up to them. But Conference, let's be clear, I don't expect them to listen. I'm just counting the days before one of the Scottish Tories suggests, like everything else that the Tories betray, fail on, and impose on the people of Scotland, that the Scottish Government should simply mitigate it. Well, Conference, I say, let's mitigate Westminster altogether. Conference, let's take our place as an independent nation state with a seat at the table amongst our equals in Europe. And now we've had a taste right here of the work that can be done in partnership with Europe, one of mutual respect and fairness. Conference, in the Highlands, we have hundreds of symbols of that partnership. On our roads, our railways, our airports, our university, across our villages and towns. Our city is dominated by a symbol of that productive friendship with Europe. Our Keswick Bridge. It was only possible because of EU funding designed to help bring us on to a level playing field. It transformed our physical connectivity in the Highlands. It stands tall on our skyline, a statement, and isn't it appropriate? Because in Scotland, we're good at building bridges. It symbolises what we stand for and the hope that we give for a better future. Others may want to build their walls, but we will have none of that. As an independent Scotland, the metaphorical bridges we build will be with our partner nations across Europe and the world, standing side by side. Conference, please support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. To second the resolution, Fergus Ewing, MSP, who is Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy, to be followed by Councillor Michelle Campbell.
Conference, what a pleasure it is to work alongside Drew Hendry in Together representing Inverness. My counterpart in the London government as the Rural Secretary is Michael Gove. And what I would say about Michael Gove is that he is polite and courteous, unfailingly so, in fact. He is, in fact, the most polite purveyor of political porkies that I have ever encountered. And let me just tell you one of those. Shortly before the Brexit referendum, his words, his pledge, his promise appeared on billboards all over the south of England. This is what he promised if people voted to leave. He said, "Vote to leave, and we will hold all the cards. We will choose the path that we want." How wrong, delegates, can you possibly be? The path that they chose led to a concrete wall that they had built, and the cards that they dealt themselves, were they aces and kings and high cards? I don't think so. These were the cards, the great British Brexit hand. These ones. But you know, they've got another card up their sleeve. They have. Yeah, I think you're starting to get the picture here. The other card up their sleeve is Michael's pal. Well, they were pals once. That card is called Boris. And this is it here. Delegates, let me turn to serious business. Last September, in order to ensure that into rural Scotland there flowed the money to farmers and crofters who support our rural communities throughout the land, we made sure that loan offers for their basic payments were issued to 17,615 farmers and crofters, a total of £344 million. By the 5th of October, most farmers and most crofters in this country received most of their money, 90% in the majority of cases. Delegates, I'm proud that most of them received their money 2 months before any farmer south of the border received a penny piece. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because of the marvelous work that is carried out by public officials working in Saughton House in Edinburgh and in ARPID offices throughout the country, 719. I've met many of them and thanked them in person. But I would ask you to show your appreciation for the magnificent work our public services do all over the country. Delegates, Drew set out the case on structural funds, and these are absolutely vital for rural Scotland. They're vital for farming, they're vital for forestry, they're vital for communities all throughout Scotland, and they're vital for fishing as well. And Europe has shown itself, the EU has shown itself to be a good financial friend to Scotland. Goodness me, we could spend, as Winnie said, decades of heart-rending struggle down in Westminster achieving precisely nothing. Let's grab independence and benefit rural Scotland once and for all.
Thank you, Fergus. And our final speaker for this resolution, Councillor Michelle Campbell.
I managed to come down. I sat at the front this time, so I wouldn't have to run downstairs. And if you're expecting juggling, that's not going to happen. I'm sorry, I can't go with the card tricks. But I would say, as a local councillor, juggling does have a big part to play with the role, but just in a very different way. I just feel that a local councillor's perspective on this would be really fruitful to the conversation. I have local businesses and third sector organisations coming up to me in real concern about how are they going to do things such as match funding. You know, because the money that they maybe have had guarantees of through the EU, they're not going to have that there anymore. And how am I supposed to offer them that reassurance We've had conversations in the chambers of our council over in Renfrewshire, and it ends up feeling like it's a parliamentary debate, and I've always been infuriated by it, and I mention it every time. We are not parliamentarians, and the parliamentarians are not doing their jobs from the Tory party. They are allowing their councillors to sit there and have those discussions with us, instead of engaging with our MPs, our MSPs, and our First Minister. We talk about respecting a result. You know, those that voted no say we should be respecting the vote. Respect the outcome of a vote. Respect goes two ways. If you're not willing to engage with those that are our representatives, our elected bodies, then what are we supposed to do? We will stand up and we will fight for our independence, because that is what this country deserves. Please support this resolution.
Thank you, Michelle. There were a number of cards in for other delegates wishing to speak, but the clock is against us in that, and there are no cards in against the resolution. So can I ask conference, is this resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you very much, delegates. We now move on to topical and emergency resolutions. The text of these will be displayed on the side screens as we move through the resolutions individually. The first is on tuition fees, to be moved by Michael Gibbons. To enable Michael to do that, I need a seconder from the floor. Do I have a seconder? I do. So thank you, Michael Gibbons.
Thank you, Kirsten, and afternoon conference. Delegates, I'm sure that you have heard by now the UK government's intention to raise tuition fees and withdraw financial support for EU students after Brexit. The Education Secretary, Damien Hinds, is planning on rolling out these destructive proposals regardless of a no-deal Brexit, the result of which is undoubtedly catastrophic to universities in England. They will suffer from an exodus of skills and talent which will turn to the EU 27 or Scotland, where they will continue to benefit from free university tuition provided by our Scottish Government. I want to make clear that as convener of our student wing, that the approach our First Minister and Government has taken warms my heart greatly. It sets a clear example of the strength of our nation and Government, that we are open to learners across Europe. I want our Scottish Government to be a beacon of education and learning, and in comparison to the UK Government, well, they make that very easy. Whilst independence does protect our interests, I really do feel for EU students wishing to study in England who will be forced to cough up unlimited sums of money to progress their education. The established proposals are already set to apply to further education and apprenticeship courses in England as well, which flies in the face of the UK Government's own commitment to respect further education and modern apprenticeship courses. No matter the rhetoric, the UK Government does not support EU nationals, full stop. Their actions consistently fail to back up their claims of support to all students. They preach fairness but consistently act against that. EU citizens make such a vital contribution to not just Scotland but the rest of the UK as well, and it's about time the UK Government acted on that. To be totally candid, I know that any degree of heart or emotion would fall on the deaf ears of the UK Department for Education. So allow me to speak of the economic impact of EU students and nationals. It makes clear economic sense to afford EU students the same right as home fee status, as they are more likely to stay and contribute to our economy. Not just in paying taxes, but in filling the vital skills gap in the dozens of economic sectors. Least of all, our NHS as doctors and nurses, our world-class universities as lecturers and support staff, our schools as teachers, and our businesses as entrepreneurs. 135,000 EU students are being told no by an inherently xenophobic government. Data collected from the Russell Group universities found that there have already been a 3% drop in the number of EU students enrolling in courses in the academic year of 2018 to 19. There was a 9% decrease in the number of EU postgraduate research students. There are also 15,000 UK students studying at universities and institutions across Europe. So what you're basically doing is now not just shafting the own people who want to come here, but you're also shafting your own students who want to go and study elsewhere and broaden their horizons. This is before we even get to Erasmus, which the UK Government has continued to leave in complete uncertainty. Delegates, you can probably tell that I'm quite angry by this. My life, and I am actually. I'm trying not to express it. My life, the life of my family, friends and country has been made so much richer by the contribution that EU nationals make to it. At least half of my current lecturers at university are born overseas, and I've chosen Scotland to come and teach. Conference, I thank you for your time, and please back the motion.
Thank you, Michael. Conference, we have no further cards and no cards in against this resolution. So can I ask delegates, is this resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you very much. So we move now to our second topical resolution, Brunei anti-gay women laws, to be moved by Jack O'Neill and seconded by Kevin Stewart, MSP.
Thank you, Conference. Conference, it can be very easy to forget when our country is considered a world leader in this fight, and when so many of our friends and allies are joining us in taking historic steps towards achieving LGBT equality that so much of the world is falling behind. But the world was forced to remember, and quite rightfully forced to react with horror, when at the beginning of April, the Sultan of Brunei announced new laws cracking down on homosexuality. While Brunei could by no means be considered progressive at all in this regard, it came as a shock to many when news broke that sex between two consenting males could now be punishable by death, and two females by 40 strokes of the cane and/or a maximum of 10 years imprisonment. And it's important to note that said death penalty in Brunei includes the barbarism of stoning. Think about that for a second, please, Conference, as hard as it is. Physically throwing stones upon someone whose only crime is acting upon their sexuality until they are dead. Conference, I know that I speak for many when I say that even in progressive countries such as our own, questioning your sexuality or identifying as LGBT at a young age can often be an unpleasant experience. For many, the thought of being outed or the fear of bullying or rejection from friends, family and loved ones can instill terror. But I can only imagine the fear that was struck into the hearts of so many when these brutal laws were so recently implemented in Brunei. My heart aches for LGBT children across the world who struggle so much with their identity, but in particular it goes out to those in the too long list of countries where being LGBT carries the very real threat of imprisonment, torture, and even death. It is not enough for us to recognise and rectify the years of terror and hardship that so many have had to endure here in Scotland. We must also, as we march towards equality, not forget about those living in countries such as Brunei and be a beacon of hope for them and provide the strong voice that they so sorely need in these times. But we must also not forget about any of the other countries where the LGBT community are often violently oppressed. When Brunei hit the papers, I think many were shocked to learn that it was just one of 35 countries in the Commonwealth where homosexuality is criminalised and 1 in 2 where it's punishable by death. So, Conference, it makes my stomach turn when I listen to the far right of the Conservative Party hail Brexit as an opportunity to reconnect with our Commonwealth cousins. Because why on earth would we ever want to abandon 27 of our closest and most progressive neighbours for 35 nations and territories where the LGBT community are violently oppressed and 2 where homosexual sex is punishable by death? We should by all means engage with these countries and encourage them to change their ways, but that does not mean cozying up to despots who would deny marginalised groups basic human rights and threaten their very existence. The laws implemented by Brunei provoked strong words from international leaders, but that is all they were, words. For meaningful change to happen and for equality to be achieved in every corner of the globe, action must be taken. Real action, and not just from governments. And it's here that I would like to praise YSI and SNP Students member Sarah Quinn, whose petition calling for an end to LGBT human rights violations in Brunei has so far amassed 86,000 signatures. And if it reaches 100,000, we'll ensure that the UK Parliament debates this important issue. Conference, I urge you to all be like Sarah and to take action to promote rights for the LGBT community both at home and abroad, whether that be by signing the petition and speaking out, or by joining in the boycott of products from these, frankly, medieval nations. The boycott of the Dorchester Hotels collection, a group of luxury hotels owned by the Sultan of Brunei, is one that I fully endorse and urge you all to observe. But it forgets about the many more countries who do not deserve our time or our money until they catch up with the times and end their evil oppression. Conference, let us pass this resolution, not only to send a strong message to Brunei and others around the world that their sickening laws will not be tolerated, but to send our solidarity to LGBT communities everywhere, so that, and to let them know that we stand shoulder to shoulder with them in this fight. Thank you very much, Conference. Please pass this resolution.
Thank you, Jack. If I can ask our speakers to come to be as concise as possible with their marks, that would be very helpful. To second this resolution, Kevin Stewart, MSP, to be followed by Julia Stakurska.
Thank you very much, Convener, and good afternoon, Conference. I am a 50-year-old gay man, and I never thought that I would ever stand in a public platform and say that I was a gay man. I'm less happy now saying that I'm 50 years old than I am saying that I'm a gay man. And the reason that I've given my age is to put some of the things which I'm about to say into context. Because I entered my teen years in the very early 80s. And at that time, at the very beginning of the 80s, homosexuality hadn't been decriminalised here in Scotland. We had newspapers really shabbily talking about HIV. And of course, we had the horror of Section 28, which stopped folk from talking to young people about who they may actually be. Thank God that we have moved on from all of that and have made real progress here in our country. So I went through those years hiding. I never told anyone that I was gay until my late 20s. I never came out to my parents until I was 39. I lived a life of fear, sometimes depression, and always unhappiness because I could not be who I was. I read on a day and daily basis at points of poofs, perverts and predators. That was the way it was. How far we have come, but we have still got a way to go. My fear, depression and unhappiness during that period of time would be nothing compared to those folks in Brunei who may think that they are gay. Nothing compared to those folks in the other countries that implement the death penalty for being gay. Brunei joins Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Sudan, Mauritania, parts of Nigeria and Somalia. All have the death penalty. That is wrong. We have progressed to a huge degree in our country. We have got a way to go still in equality, but we have made major moves. Let's be a world leader and let's try and persuade and use all in our power to make these countries see sense and to make the progress that they too should be making. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Our final speaker in support of this resolution is Julia Stakurska.
Conference, it is commonly taken for granted in our society that people are heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and that everyone can be placed in a label, or indeed no label at all. The important point to grasp here is that these terms are not simply words which describe particular kinds of sexual behaviour. They carry with them assumptions and they carry fear. There had long been religious and cultural disapproval of sex between men, but this was, of course, because it was a type of non-reproductive sexual intercourse. In the United Kingdom, The death penalty for non-reproductive sexual intercourse was abolished in 1861. And homosexuality was substantially, if not completely, decriminalised in much of Britain by the 1967 Sexual Offences Act. That is 1861 and 1967 conference. How many of us were even born then? Sorry. Conference, however, today and the I'm sorry. However, today, in the 21st century, the year 2019, we have countries turning back the clock to these intolerant, outdated views and opting to punish people for who they love, live with, and want to grow old with. Let me say this clearly, Conference. We need to say it loudly to the Sultan of Brunei. What he is doing is at all levels heartbreaking and fundamentally disturbing. There is nothing criminal about being in love. Conference, the issue was largely picked up by students, and a campaign was launched by students of Aberdeen University to revoke the Sultan's honorary degree, which was awarded by the university in 1995. The degree was first under review, but is now rightly revoked. It is because of the power of students, like many members of the FSN, who are the future of this country, that this happened. There is no place for bigotry in Scotland. I can say on behalf of the entirety of SNP students, we are proud of our foundational belief that we should be open, progressive and working towards equality for all. We have a strong commitment to the value of diversity and inclusion. The rest of the world should follow our lead. We in Scotland champion LGBTQ+ rights. The UK and the rest of the world needs to do the same. Conference, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. We have no further cards in to speak for this resolution. So delegates, can I ask, is this resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. Our final topical resolution is on the topic of EU citizens' migration, to be moved by Fiona Hislop, MSP, and seconded by Ben McPherson, MSP. Fiona is our Cabinet Secretary for Culture, Tourism and External Affairs.
Conference, Scotland is for Europe. Brexit is broken. Brexit is breaking the British state just to save the Tory party. And whether people voted leave or remain, the political constitutional system is failing you. And this party has known that Westminster is a failed system, but Brexit is making it quite clear to everyone that the Westminster system is broken. And Conference, that's why we need independence.